Okay, Mike's working and everything. Okay, good. Well, welcome to the science influencers and to our note participants. And I'm pleased to be talking today about preparing for an internship. And to begin with an overview, but we would start by talking about some reasons to do internships. Then talk about finding an internship, either now or in the future. I know science influencers, I think all have internships by now, but you may be looking for the future, or some of our remote participants may be. The main focus will be on making the most of your experience. And I'll say a little bit about giving an internship presentation afterwards to share your experience. I should say that I have a fair amount of experience with internships on both sides, and I'm speaking in part from that experience. Way back in the day, I was an intern. One of my interns was a mass media fellowship through the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and I was lucky enough to do that at Newsweek magazine and help with the cover story and some other stories. That was wonderful. And I also had several internships or the equivalent in laboratories. So
just a second, Barbara. For some reason, your screen's not sharing.
Huh. So not sharing with them, mostly.
Can you guys see it online now?
No, we still can't see it. Well, I can't see it. There it is.
Did it appear?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. So sorry, I will go back. This is the overview, which heard, and I was talking about my experience as an intern, both at Newsweek and in laboratories. I've also been an internship host. And also, I've coordinated internships. Some of you know I at the master's degree program in science and technology journalism, and so I'm in charge of placing interns and monitoring their progress. And also, there was an international program where I placed trainees from China and other Asian countries in internships. And also, I've written things about internships and presented things about internships. And one of the nice things about presenting them is I've been on panels where other people have talked about their experience, either hosting interns or being interns. And so I've picked up some new perspectives. Some introductory thoughts. One is simply sort of a definition of internship. What do we mean when we're talking about an internship? And one, I think, fairly good definition is an internship is a temporary job that a student or recent graduate takes in order to get experience in the area they want to work in. And I think I'd expand this because now it's becoming more and more common for people even to do mid-career internships if they want to, for example, shift to work in a related field. And maybe please for the people here, I know you're heading into internships now. Have any of you done any internships before? So plus minus or not. So it may be maybe new. And I wanted to ask some of your initial thoughts. What are some reasons to do internships?
Yes. I mean, especially with mine, I think I learned how to do all the stuff in college, and I get to show people that I actually did learn this stuff. I know what I'm doing.
Okay, so one is to demonstrate your skills to potential employers or other people.
I would say my biggest reason is to gain real world experience.
Because it's one thing to like learn about all this stuff from a professor or textbook, and it's another to go into a lab and like work on things with myself and learn in a more tangible way.
Right. I think that's another big one. Get real world experience, because you can only go so far in the classroom that provides a good foundation, but it's a great and often like a sheltered way to get your feet wet and start getting real world experience. Any other reasons? Yes.
That would also be my first, gaining hands-on experience. And then the second one would be networking.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So get hands-on and networking, really important part for that. Starting to, build your professional network. Any others?
Hi, this is Kim Cochran online. I'm a PI for the Scarlet REEU program. And I had an internship a million years ago when I was an undergrad. And it was actually really useful for me to help me figure out what I wanted to do. So it let me kind of test out that type of work that I was doing during my internship and see if it was something I wanted to do as a career. So kind of a trial run.
Yeah, I think, right. I think that's a really important one too, because it's like a low risk trial run. And I find many people find that it's what they want to do. But I know, for example, I had one person who had always dreamed of working a certain place, tried it out and found out she really didn't like it and liked something else better. And that was a way to do it without, being in an awkward environment. Yeah, so I think you all came up with basically the same list I have. I mean, one is, one reason an internship, getting some experience, gain knowledge and skills. You may learn new knowledge, new skills. As was mentioned, to define your interests, see what you really like and don't like. As mentioned, establish contacts, build your network. Sometimes to build your portfolio too, communications internship, getting writing examples, things like that. If it's a lab internship, maybe being acknowledged on a paper. So building your portfolio, building your resume. An internship's a good thing on your resume. Often obtain references. If an internship goes well, people can be references for jobs or graduate school. And possibly obtain a job. I've had some students for whom their internship actually turned into a job, or later when their internship site had an opening, they hired them. So I think many good reasons to do an internship. I think I guess a question to consider, and I think from the science influencers, it's already answered. Where will you do an internship this summer, or where and when do you hope to do one? So perhaps some of our remote people or the students working with the remote people can reflect on them. And at least in my field, it's often common to do more than one internship. So even if someone has an internship this summer, people may be looking ahead to a second or third internship. And then I think a really important one is what you want to gain from your internship, which sort of harks back to the purposes for the internship. But think about what you want to gain and then trying to arrange so that you do gain that. And then often some other things too. Often there are surprises what one gains. Finding an internship, I think there are lots of channels. I mean, people in the program have already found them, but for future internships or for other people, one is that there are established internship programs at places, but then there are a lot of sort of ad hoc internships. In other words, sort of one-off kinds of things where someone just decides they like an intern, or someone decides, well, this would be a cool place to intern, and as many of you have done, contacts a potential host and set something up. I find internships sort of come and go. Sometimes there's some places that sometimes they'll have interns, sometimes not, depending on their funding or people's travel plans or whatever. And here are some ways to identify potential internships. One, I mean, you're all just finished a course on online media, so certainly searching online media has become a very common way. Also watching for postings, for example, postings on websites of organizations in your field or postings at your university. consulting science influencers, faculty, and others. I know sometimes people will get internships, for example, in program I direct, they'll come to me and talk about what their interests are in. And I say, oh yeah, I know so-and-so in that field. Why don't we see if they'll take an intern? Also, sometimes there are internship fairs or job fairs where you can find out about internships. And as we talked about, just think about where would you like to intern and contacting them. And there's normally nothing to be lost about contacting them. And even if they don't have an internship, it's building your network. And I just have a slide of, some of the places that my graduate students have interned over the years. It's interesting, and in the literature that there's some discussion of common phases that internships go through. Because usually it's not just all smooth. Even the best internships, there, are rough times or things that need resolution. So let me mention, according to the literature and also according to some of my observations, 3 common, though not universal phases. Usually when you land an internship, there's excitement and sort of idealization, wow, I've got an internship, I'm going to be at this great place, I have this wonderful mentor, I'm set for life. Then, a little while after you get there, there's kind of a letdown. Maybe there's a sense of disorientation, like, well, I knew where everything was in college and I don't know where anything is. Frustration, my grades are all good. I was always so good in labs. I don't know this technique. I'm not sure. And maybe even disillusionment, wow, from the CV, my mentor looked great, but, they're so busy. They don't have enough time for me. So there's often sort of a letdown and disillusionment, but then things loop back up again, sort of more in the middle and sort of a realistic sphere. There's sort of adaptation and think, yeah, wow, I'm really learning a lot and I can do this and I'm contributing. And this is a really good, opportunity. So I would say, don't panic if you have a little bit of a letdown, maybe your second week of your internship or something like that, because often, there is sort of that stress then, but then with, taking the time to learn things, maybe talking with your supervisor, talking with other people at your site, then things get evened out. And one question to consider looking ahead is, what are some things you do to make the most of your internship experience? So let me ask people here and people remotely, what are some things people can do to take full advantage of their experience? Yes.
Keeping like a notebook or like a planner. So every single day just to write down what you were doing, because like at the very end with the research symposium, when you have to present results, you're probably not going to remember as much as you would like to. So to have a day-to-day planner will help you keep track.
I think that's a terrific idea, have a notebook or planner and basically keep a journal, keep track of what you're going to do, because that will be good for reporting. It'll be good for seeing your own progress. I know it can be good even for other things. I remember one of the best interns I had she was working communications for her internship at a physics lab, and there was a lot of new vocabulary. And in her journal, she'd always write down the new words she learned, and it was amazing how much her specialized vocabulary grew. Yeah, so great. Yeah, keeping notes, keeping a journal. Other ideas, yes.
Reflect on things like before, during, and after the internship.
Yes, thank you. You've just set it up very well for Dr. Wingenbach's presentation. He's going to talk about reflection. You can pay him afterwards. Other thoughts, yes.
I would say, like, I know a lot of us are going, I guess, outside of A&M or coming to A&M, right? College Station at least. But I know, like, exploring the new world that you're a part of and, like, assessing the culture both in and and both in and out of wherever you're working could be really important, and see like how you interact with, I guess, the new culture around you.
Yeah, so I'm almost an anthropologist at and exploring your new culture, both so you can function smoothly and so you can learn from it and enjoy it. You know, for some of my interns, one of the greatest things was a chance to be in, you know, a different part of the state or a different part of the country or the world. Yes.
Setting goals and discussing them with your mentor.
I think that's a great idea. Setting goals and discussing them with your mentor. Make sure you're on the same page. Great. Good. Again, you're coming up with a similar list to mine. Tips before the internship. Consider your goals. So number one. And I'd say research the internship site. So beforehand, you know about the culture, you know about location, how to get around. And also research your internship supervisor. You know, at least look at their CV, look at their website. If you haven't already, find out about them. And review relevant knowledge. Maybe you'll be applying something you had in some of your courses. Review it so you're up to speed. And if appropriate, brush up on the skills you'll need. So that's before the internship. How about during the internship? I would say, if at all possible, meet regularly with your supervisor. I find internship supervisors often are really busy. They get pulled in a lot of ways, and it's really easy for 2-3 weeks to go by without you really even meeting them. So I know when I have an intern, I usually like to set up at least weekly meeting times, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a week, to make sure we are on the same page. Also, I'd say cultivate other contacts. There, usually at an internship site, there are lots of people you can learn from, and that can become part of your network. So take advantage of that. And that can be an advantage even if you don't have the greatest internship supervisor. I remember I generally get terrific internship supervisors, but for one of them, you know, I think someone else had lined me up as an intern, and I was sort of foist on him, and he really wasn't very interested in mentorship. But it turned out at the same site, there was someone who had graduated from the same university a few years after I was, or before I did, and you know, and we felt really good rapport, and she provided a lot of mentorship. Or sometimes there are different people with different skills that you can learn from. There may be, for example, your lab, there may be graduate students, there may be techs, there may be postdocs. So, you know, cultivate other contacts too. I would say be active, take initiative, volunteer things, but don't get yourself overextended. Sometimes interns volunteer to do too much and then they can't complete their primary roles. But I would say try to be somewhat active. I would say be flexible too, because sometimes things don't work out exactly as expected, and maybe you'll have some tasks that you didn't expect or things like that. So show some flexibility. I would say also be ready to take some chances, you know, to try some things that you haven't tried before. Don't just play it safe and say you're only going to do the things you already know you're good at. Because remember, you're there primarily to learn, not to impress. So take chances to learn. And from what I've seen from the dozens or probably hundreds of internship reports I've gotten from internship supervisors, they like people who take a chance and learn. They, often they will say, so-and-so is really open to learning. When they don't know something, they still try it and learn it. So that is a plus. So I would say, be willing to take some chances and try some new things. Another thing is, when problems arise, I mean, commonly, glitches arise, but communicate, don't hide. If there's a difficulty, talk with someone about it, and most likely can be resolved. Whereas if it's not talked about, it can just grow and fester. And I think I can speak for the other members of the leadership team, if there's a problem, feel free to discuss it with us. And I know for my science journalism interns, often if something comes up, we'll talk about it and what's the best way to raise it, or is it important enough to raise or not? I would say keep samples of your work, whether it's communications or other things. That can be helpful in building your portfolio or in giving a report later. And as was mentioned, if you're doing an away and internship, explore the environment. That's one of the real pluses. I still remember one of my students who had never been outside of his part of Texas, and got an internship in the Washington, D.C. area. And he just got so much out of exploring Washington, D.C. and Maryland and Virginia. And then, in keeping with what's coming up from Dr. Wingenbach, reflect on your experience. And I won't say any more because Dr. Wingenbach will say a lot about that. One question is, what if the internship is remote? This is one of my students who did a remote internship. And remote internships are becoming more and more common. Clearly not things that require hands-on or field work, but some, for communications internships, or even things that require field work. Sometimes they may be part in place and in part remote. I think for a remote internship, allow enough time to overcome the technology hurdles. I found we've had several people for whom being able to connect to the computer system for their site and things like that took a long time, or getting certain permissions and clearances. I would say if you can arrange to have a face-to-face component, even if it's a remote internship, it is really helpful. I know what we do in our program, if we have a remote internship, we try to at least have the person on site for, say, the first week, so they get to know people and are oriented. Or if we can't do that, we try to have a capstone experience toward the end where they visit the site. I would say for something like this, it's especially important to meet regularly with your internship supervisor. I know last summer I had a student doing a remote internship. The student was here. The internship was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And she had a super internship supervisor who met with her by, I think by Zoom, every morning of the internship. And that way, she kept engaged. But I'd say also include interactions with other team members. It's not as easy as when you're on site and people are in the next lab or down the hall. But often, if you're on Slack, if you're on other, messaging apps, you can be looped in and be part of the group. Have enough structure, but also, as with other internships, a lot of time for serendipity. Sometimes opportunities arise that you didn't expect. And I think rather than thinking of a remote internship as sort of a compromise or something not so good, I think it's reasonable to think of them as preparation for future remote employment, because now more and more jobs are remote. And so if in an internship, you learn skills for working effectively remotely, and the site sees that you're capable of working remotely, things can be set for the future. How about after the internship, or when the internship ends? I would say, if relevant, keep in touch with your internship host and others. Was mentioned early on, building a network. And so you can cultivate that network. As I'll mention a little later, my first internship was in a lab when I was 16 years old. And for several decades afterwards, I kept in touch with my mentor from that. And I would say also pay it forward by hosting interns as your career progresses. I mean, I really appreciated the internships I had. And so it's really nice to be on the other side and, think about, well, what had worked well in my internships, what hadn't worked well, and then apply that to hosting interns of my own. And then also share your internship experience with others. And if you're in the Science Influencers program, that is built in, through social media and presentations. And this picture is one of my graduate students giving a presentation about a wonderful internship that she had. And then this other picture is actually of an article I did that was about the experience with that first mentor and how it shaped my own mentorship style. And so in terms of sharing the internship, a few words on giving a presentation about an internship. So either both people here and people remotely, what tips do you have for giving a presentation about your internship? Any tips?
You mean like after you do an internship?
Yeah, so after you do an internship, when you come back and you're sharing it with people.
I would say include a lot of pictures.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, include a lot of pictures. So you may want to plan accordingly to your internship to have plenty of pictures. Yeah,
That like working or in action, if you're in the lab, like everything that you do at the lab, stuff like that.
Right, yes, right. So I would include lots of pictures. If you are in a lab or a commercial environment, there may be some kinds of limitations on pictures you can share. So they want to think, but great, in action. And then if you're exploring the environment and everything, yes. So thank you for mentioning pictures. Yes.
If you like create different materials during your internship, maybe bring them. So like an example would be like for mine, I'm doing like a publication. So bringing like an actual copy of the publication for people to learn.
Right, okay, yeah. So it's nice to sort of have show and tell as well for your presentation. Suggestion. A few, I think it's helpful to present it almost like a narrative. Do it as a story. Let people experience your internship vicariously. So in this presentation, or let's say if you've got a blog or other social media, let people follow along with you. I would say also include not only information but emotion. Share what some of your feelings were. If you were, kind of bewildered at the beginning, or if you were excited when that essay finally worked, or whatever. Share that emotion. Just as mentioned, consider incorporating various media. Talked about photos, sort of show and tell. Some of you may be doing internships that have an auditory component. So you may want audio clips. You may want to have some video. So we can think about what would work well. Yeah, it's mentioned, in the internship thing to add about audio, video, and artifacts to obtain. And it was mentioned right early, keeping a journal. So consult your journal for ideas. And so that ends the formal part of my presentation. I would be glad to open it up both for questions. And I know that there are people here with internship experience. I know we have some of our remote people who have experience either being interns or hosting interns. So I would be delighted to open it up for additional suggestions and questions. Yes.
It just occurred to me, maybe in the post-internship presentation, maybe offering gratitude for the opportunity or more formal
I think
letter.
absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I would say gratitude all the way along. I think, let's say if you're going to a presentation, a thank you slide and things like that, and do, and during the internship also, thank your host, thank other people. Ideally, they are gaining things from your internship, both from the work you're providing and from things they're learning from you, but they're also putting out effort. So yes, thank you for reminding us to include gratitude.
It's also about the hosts, like talking about their internship and like what they wanted to have overall, like their end product. And then you could talk about how you got to that product and like how you got there, and if you found something new, how you could add.
Right, yes, I agree, that. Too. Yes.
I have a question. So, what are some like characteristics and qualities that you look for in your interns?
Yeah, some characteristics and qualities I look for my interns. I'll start that and then I'll see maybe our remote people or other people here. I guess in some of my interns, I mean, a lot of it are just things you were selected for in science influencers. You're bright and well educated. Certainly, I want my interns to be reliable. I know sometimes people, had non-science influences interns, and they don't show up. They don't do the things they say they do. So I want, certainly I want someone who's reliable. I want someone who has a positive attitude, who's not just saying, well, I'll do it, but, has a positive attitude, who's willing to learn, who is, I think those are some of the things that I would look for in, an intern or an employee. How about other people? What are some of the things you look for in an intern? Things that for you make a good intern? Dr. Wingenbach, do you have things you?
Yes, most certainly. I mean, as far as I want to back up just one step to, you said things that you can highlight for the end of the internship experience. And I think one of the things I think of most often, many, many decades ago, when I was on my summer internships, is I wish I had spent more time thinking about and reflecting on how I changed as a person, even after 3 short months. My thinking changed, my attitude toward business, because I had one business internship, changed dramatically because all of a sudden I was out of the classroom and thrust into the future world that I thought I was going to have as a profession or a career. Later, when I did a science internship, I realized that this whole world of science inquiry opened up to me that I had never considered, because I was always, like most students, I compartmentalized everything that happened in the classroom to stay in the classroom. And finally, the internship, I saw actual abstract theories come to life. And it was the aha moment. It was enlightening. And when I think back on how much that changed, after about 8 weeks of that science internship, how much it changed my perspective on future inquiry. It's like Pandora's box got opened up into, there's always another question that's much more interesting to ask. Let's go find the answers. And then that one leads to more questions. So, as opposed to just filling out an internship report, which I had to do, I conducted X number of soil samples, et cetera, et cetera. But I also had the opportunity to verbalize with my supervisor how much it changed my thinking.
Yeah, and verbalize reminds me, I think the other thing I look for in an intern is someone who's a good communicator. I mean, don't have to be a Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, but someone who communicates clearly. How about our remote people? What kinds of attributes do you look for, or would you look for in an intern?
Dr. Kimberly Wayne said, good teamwork skills.
Good teamwork skills. Yes. Great. Are there any other things in the chat?
In the chat so far, that's
Yeah. Any final observations, Dr. Leggett? Anything about attributes you'd seek in an intern, or things I didn't say about being an internship?
I just, I think about some of those things that you can't necessarily teach. It's just kind of showing up to do the work and to, as my little one always says, with a happy heart. I think that that's really, one of those types of things to where you can't teach some of those types of things is punctuality and always thinking about the next step, like what's the next thing I need to be doing instead of having to be told, like, go do this,
Absolutely. Initiative,
Yeah, initiative.
self-starter, those sorts of things are phenomenal.
another in the chat is resilience.
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 Yes.
Hi, this is Kim Cochran, online again. So one thing I do like to see in intern would be people or interns who show up with what I call presence of mind. And by that, I mean they are engaged, not that they know everything already, but they walk in with kind of learning objectives and goals, or at least kind of a rough idea of their goals for the internship. But also, it can be something as small as when you have a scheduled meeting with your advisor or your mentor, go into that meeting with one or two prepared questions that are not technical skill questions, but rather mentor questions that are more about soft skills or professional development or something like that. So it shows that you've thought ahead, you've taken the time to prepare those thoughts for that meeting. And that drives much more productive and rich discussion with your mentor rather than just coming in as a blank slate, wanting them to spoon feed you everything. So putting that thought in ahead of time, having kind of engaged planning along the way, even before you have your first meeting, that can be really helpful. And I really like to see that in students because it shows me they're really thinking about their experience and what they're getting out of their internship other than just something to put on their resume.
Absolutely, and well said. Yes, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, I think we have about 1 minute before turning this over to Dr. Wingenbach. And so any final comments, or? I think that that wraps it up. I want to thank you all for your participation. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Wingenbach.
Thank you for